At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Justin, welcome to the show.
Good to be here.
Hey, it's good to have you here.
Here, there, yeah, wherever. Yep.
Wherever we happen to be, right? That's what's so amazing now, that you can be wherever you want to in the world and still have this wonderful communication going on.
Yep. The times are different, places are different, but it's all this moment, right? It's all the now.
Exactly. Except someone's just waking up and someone's just going to sleep. So that's kind of how that works. So yeah, you've written a book, and let the audience know what the name of the book is.
It is called Sorcery 101, 13 Rungs to a Higher Elevation of Consciousness.
Okay.
Sorcery spelled with a U. Yeah.
Yes. So that's great. And obviously talking about consciousness, I'd love for you to share with the audience, because you have quite a journey. Share with the audience what your journey has been and what brought you to this point to write the book and to do what you're doing.
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey, certainly. So I was born and raised here in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona. I had a tough childhood in that I kind of grew up in an emotional vacuum. So I like to say, I use a lot of pop culture and humor in my book. I like to consider myself kind of a mystical comedian. I kind of meld the two of comedy and philosophy, kind of stand-up philosophy stuff. But one of the things I like to say is, my childhood was like Fight Club. It was like around my house. It was like, the first rule is you do not talk about your feelings. And the second rule is you do not talk about your feelings. And that's what it was like growing up around my house. It just, nothing was spoken of that was anything remotely vulnerability. So anything involving the spirit, anything involving good feelings, bad feelings, anything involving drugs, alcohol, sex, anything, just none of that was discussed at all, ever. When I would be kind of feeling bad and I'd be kind of talking to my mom, it was obvious she was not comfortable talking to me about that. And she would just tell me, well, go take a shower, you'll feel better. Because she had no idea like how to, console a child, or like to, she did the best she could, because that's how she was raised. Everyone is just a reflection of the environments they were raised in. She did the best she could. And I love her very much. And she's passed on now, but it just when you don't tell a child they're loved, valued, and I wasn't never told I love you, or there wasn't a lot of hugging. It just was a real emotional vacuum in my home. And when you don't tell a child they're loved, valued, safe, they're going to look for the world for these things, and the world is always going to tell them they're unvalued, unloved, and unsafe. So, growing up with those kind of core beliefs inside of me led to some really tough times as a teenager into my 20s. Just a lot of mental, emotional issues, ADHD, and the depression and anxiety and all these things that spun me back and forth in America's sick care system here, and a lot of substance abuse, alcohol problems, and prescription pills became my favorite thing. So it's legal drugs, right? I can pretend like I wasn't a total drug addict, because these were everything is okay, everything's legal, it's okay, right? Like, that's not exactly correct, but that's what I thought at the time. So just it was really a tough going there for quite a while. And finally, kind of in my 30s, I got things together a little bit. And I've experienced some periods of sobriety. I started going to the kind of AA and doing a more Christian religious type thing. And I was sober, but I was not thriving at all. I still had all my core issues of pretty bad anxiety and depression, but I was sober. So I considered it kind of a win. And that kind of happened, and I kept with that for a while. And and then in, late 30s, I'm early 40s now, and it's, I had a lot of horrible things just coincide and happen, which kind of led to the writing this book. I had my mother died. It was a very tough thing where it was a long drawn out process of this year where her kind of body was dwindling and her mind was dwindling, and that was really tough to see. And then my sister had died, and I had a close childhood friend die. I got attacked in the face by a dog. I had a fiance who just all of a sudden left, moved across the country with our infant son, and just cut me out of their lives. Just cut me out. I just haven't seen or talked to him in 2 years. So I had a lot of really hard things happen, and that is where kind of you can, instead of going through it, we need to grow through it. And that's what I was trying to focus on, was kind of growing through this time period. I was just asking, just daily, like I became obsessed of reading about. I was kind of letting go of the Christian way of things, and finding that was really part of what made my mother's passing so traumatic, was that she was not a Christian, and the whole time I had this programming going on from these pastors that she's going to hell, and it made her ending days much more traumatic than they needed to be. I would have been kind of this shepherd into the next life and been excited for her like I am now after these experiences that I have had in meditation. That's let me know that everything is fine. But at the time, that's not what it was. So letting go of these things in my life was really a big deal. So I was letting go with a lot. I was doing some meditation. It's just all these things and these horrible traumas and all this stuff kind of came together in this soup that gave me vision and created this new kind of program for healing trauma. And that's where I'm at now, and it's very exciting. And I hope to kind of be the energy doctor, and a doctor of divinity, and that's where I'm at right now.
Okay, so you mentioned a couple of things I want to get into a little bit. Number one, you were in AA, and you mentioned that they kind of move you into a Christian kind of situation here, which obviously for many people works, and it apparently worked for you to some degree. And then you end up with a situation where a pastor and his perception of Christianity suddenly goes totally opposite and puts you right back into that sense of stress and so forth, because talking about your mom, which, we won't get into that whole thing as far as, why people perceive that way and then try to influence other people that way. But let's talk a little bit about perception. Let's talk about, reality and why it is that people have totally different realities. I mean, we look at what's going on right now, okay, in the US, and all of the anger and all of the things that are going on. And you look at that and you've got one person with a certain reality, and you've got another person with a completely opposite reality. And yet, if we look at reality as a genuine item, there's only one reality. And so how does that happen? What was your experience as you started to look at this and develop this concept of how reality and perception really determines how we look at life?
Yeah, it is fascinating how, our world, we are, what we perceive it is. And, life is a projection of your internal cores and beliefs. And, just like any projector, a projector, if you think you're going to put a movie in the projector and it's going to play a movie, the projector isn't going to tell you, this movie sucks, let's play a different movie. It's going to play whatever you put in there to play. And that is our realities. I mean, that is the perception of things, and especially things like politics and everything. It just warps it so much. And the world is not, and that is the big thing about sorcery, is one of the biggest parts is this concept of both and. it just, the world is not this black and white, it's not that. And people's minds want to put everything in a box where it is or it is not. Religion versus science. It is one or the other. And spirituality is this middle intersecting point that just takes the best parts of both of them and comes up with this whole new way to look at things that people really aren't that familiar with. So, and that's the exciting part about this. And I think people are starting to, wonder and question some of their beliefs. And that's the shadow work is the first rung. And that is about, the shadow is created by, childhood traumas and limiting beliefs. And it is this side of us that causes reaction, a reactionary side of us. And starting to question that and, that go over things that in our minds that we've believed are true, but maybe aren't so true. And people are starting to understand that more because of the whole, AI and the deep fake and fake news. And there's all this, people are starting to be like, okay, there's a lot of illusionary stuff going on here. Like what is real and what is not? And starting to question that is really the first step in creating better perceptions and using your intuition instead of just taking things at face value.
Right.
Your heart will lead you in the right direction.
Well, and obviously, as you were talking about it, the way that you were brought up, and I don't think that's an uncommon situation, by the way, that literally most people have a difficult time really talking about emotions and those type of things. But the way you were brought up created this belief system, this perception within you of reality that, as you talked about it, really ultimately created some real issues for you. But what fascinates me is you talked about meditation, you're talking about some of these things, and I'd love for you to share with the audience, number one, at what point in time did you have that aha moment that said, you know what, I've got to change? Number one. And then number two, what were some of the processes that you personally went through that brought you to the point of meditation, brought you to the point of consciousness, which a lot of people never experience?
Yeah, so there's several things. One, I've been kind of in this nation's sick care system for decades, trying to, come up with a medicinal answer to my spiritual problem. And that was number one. That was not working. So, I mean, we live in this world where there is one core issue, and that core issue is spiritual bankruptcy. And there are so many symptoms of spiritual bankruptcy. Any illness considered chronic is, I believe, at the core, a spiritual issue. But everything is focused on the symptom and managing symptoms. Our healthcare system is set up to manage symptoms, not to actually cure anything. So it's just managing symptoms of depression, managing anxiety, autoimmune disorder. Everything is go to a doctor for this, go, take some pills for that, go see a therapist for this. Go, if you have an alcohol problem, you go to meetings. If you have a drug problem, you go to other meetings. If you have a gambling problem, you go to other meetings. And everything is set and is completely different. If you're just now, we're seeing how big an issue that the phone is, because the phone is a really massive problem these days. I go to the gym and I see men and women that can't even get through a weight set and without checking their phone. It's like that, they do 10 leg extensions real quick and then they have to check their phones. And that's an issue. That's an issue. And that it's just putting off feeling. Everything is putting off feeling. We look to everything. And the thing with like meditation is that it allows you to have a divergent focus on things instead of we're constantly in a convergent focus. We go from this to that to this to that all day. Work to we're doing the phone, we're doing work, we're doing TV, we're doing family. There's a convergent focus completely throughout the day. And meditation allows you to have a divergent focus on things, which is a broadening of the focus. And that's when Source gets to talk to you.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about what was your aha moment. What was it that finally said, all right, boom, I've got to change? And then what were some of the processes, the books you were reading, maybe workshops you were going to, maybe hiring someone to help you as a mentor, or an advisor, whatever that was. What were some of those things that brought you to the point where you were able to start meditating and understanding the power of meditation? Because I totally agree with you. That's a great thing to be able to do.
Yeah, it was actually in a time, it was about 4 years ago, and that moment came to me it wasn't actually in a meditation at the time, but I had what I can only describe as a bliss attack, because I've had panic attacks my whole life, and this was a bliss attack. It was like if you replace panic with love. And for 3 hours, I was in this state, this complete euphoric state, and I realized I had spent my life at that point in airplane mode. So a phone perpetually in airplane mode is not living up to its potential. You're not going to get any signals or calls or texts or anything. What's on there is on there, and that's it. So I realized in that moment I was on airplane mode, and airplane mode had been disabled. And from that point on, everything changed. I realized that there is an energy field that we can tap into, and that is source energy. That is why sorcery is spelled with a U, source energy. And trying to explain source energy to someone, I've found, is a bit like trying to explain the concept of water to a fish. And it's like, imagine trying to do that. Well, it's this substance, it surrounds you, and you wouldn't be alive without it. And it's how you get around and move and breathe. And the fish would be like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. So it is that field of energy. And in this moment, I realized, I was a fish in a pond my whole life, just swimming in a pond. And all of a sudden, one day, an angler comes in and rips that fish out of that pond. And now you see this whole other insanely majestical world that, oh my gosh, there are other ponds. Oh, there's land, there's oceans, what is this? Like that is that moment of wow. And that's really, explaining this to someone is very hard. It would be like going to, getting an electric shock, stick a fork in an outlet and get an electric shock. And then you try to explain that to someone that lives in the jungles of the Amazon. It's difficult to do. Like, how do you explain an electric shock to someone who doesn't understand electricity? And that's what this moment was. And from that point on, I was still kind of struggling, but, I wanted to avoid, my destiny, but after airplane mode is turned off, it can never be turned back on again. You can kind of avoid it. I was still having problems with drinking and trying to avoid my emotions then. So you can kind of turn it, but it's always there. And it's always like, it's like the destiny thing is like, hey, when are you going to wake up? When are you going to wake up? And finally, I really started getting my act together and started, I realized I had, a talent for this, and I just kept learning about everything, and everything started coming together. And I had moved to Sedona because it was just kind of a trauma response after my fiance left with our son. I just moved to Sedona, and it was there that it kind of came to me that was like, okay, we're going to help other people get through this, and we're going to create a system of how to do this, and this is where we're going to start, and that is this book, and that is the system. And so from here, it'll be very interesting to see.
Well, and I love that. And, it's interesting. And this is maybe off the subject, but it comes to my mind at least. We talk about source, we talk about that energy. A lot of meditative leaders talk about the quantum field and the source there and so forth. And yet, where does that source come from? And I think it's important for people who happen to be, whether they're Christian, Islam, Buddhist, Hindu, whatever that happens to be, the bottom line is many people do believe in a higher individual, a higher God. And I think for people that are listening, that at least as I've looked at this, I understand that, there are those that say, well, there is no God, but there's a source. And for me, I think it's important to understand, in the audience that happens to believe in that higher source, that's where it comes from. That source comes from somewhere. It just doesn't exist. It comes from somewhere. And you may disagree with me on that, but bottom line, I want the audience to understand that, because I don't want them to not listen anymore. because bottom line, I think your story and the points that you've made in your book are extremely important. And oftentimes, as you know, sometimes somebody says a word and it completely turns you off and you don't listen anymore. So I want to kind of put that in there. But let's talk about the book. So you talked about the first rung, which was shadow work. And that's really where you're identifying what those perceptions are, those limiting beliefs are that have been created within your mind and your soul. And oftentimes you had no control over that. It's just something that's happened as a child. So what's the second rung?
The second rung is a call for inaction, which is about meditation. So, and there is 13 of them. Speaking of the shadow work, there's 13 of them for a very specific reason. And that's because, 13 here in America, at least, is considered a very unlucky number to the point where we have no 13th floors in hotels, which is just
I know,
mind-boggling. Like that's how influential that, but it's all bullshit. There's no reason for it. I looked up kind of like why, and there's really no concrete reason. They kind of say, well, people kind of think it's because there were 13 people at the Last Supper and Judas was considered the 13th person. So it was considered a lot. So, the whole logic of it is completely faulty. It's gone back much, much further than that to being associated with the divine and being good luck and prosperous to those who embrace it. So there's 13 rungs for a very specific reason. And it is that kind of shadow work that is, you start to question, okay, what is real? What is not? And 13, starting there, that is a very lucky number. So yeah, and then the second one is a call for inaction. And I compare, having that divergent focus. It's like if you were to put a blindfold on and go stand with your nose up to a brick wall, you take the blindfold off, all you're going to see is a blurry shade of red, right? And you take a step back, oh, now you can make out a brick. You take out another step back, you can see that there's a few bricks. Take another step back, okay, it's a wall. And then you take another step back, it's like, okay, this wall is attached to something. And then you go even further back and you see that what was originally just a blurry shade of red is now a magnificent castle. And now you've achieved this divergent focus. And that is what makes meditation so incredibly critical, is that people need to stop looking at this, at their nose and, this blurry shade of red when there's this incredible castle all around us. And that is why meditation is so important. That it is the break. I was asked once, do you ever take a break from meditating? Is it like the gym? It's like, well, no, you don't take a break from meditation, because meditation is the break. Your mind is going all the time and it finally gets to rest and just relax. And it's amazing the differences it makes. And, just starting with just 5 minutes is good.
All right. So meditating every day. And as you say, it can be just 5 minutes or longer for some people. Then what goes into the third rung?
The third one is called Surrender to Serenity, and that's about accepting person, places, and things as they are. And the main focus for Surrender Serenity is human behavior, and that's what I get into the most, is trying to understand human behavior better. And we place, bad people in this category of that's a bad person and that's a good person, when it's, again, this is the world of gray. There is both and it is about understanding, because I've been now in both places. There is no bad and good people. Like I have been, I would get in trouble for drinking and driving. I don't have any felonies, but I've had several misdemeanors. I got in trouble for stealing was a big thing. Alcohol. I stole a bunch of alcohol when I was, a teenager, and, I'd steal stuff from department stores for money in my 20s. And, that's a bad guy, but there was a good guy in there, and so it is about understanding human behavior better, so that when bad things happen or people do bad things to us, it's understanding that people are simply a reflection of the environment they were raised. And that's all. They're just programmed machines doing what they were programmed to do. And it's helped me immensely deal with offensive and nasty behavior and all that stuff.
Well, and what's interesting is as you're able to do that, and you call it serenity, but as you're able to, as you're meditating, those things come up, and as you're able to just to acknowledge it, just to acknowledge that, okay, this is there, that somehow takes away the power of that negative belief or negative imprint. And I think that's amazing. So then from there, you go into the fourth rung. And what's that?
Yes, that is health is wealth, which is fairly self-explanatory. I kind of get into, like the importance of taking care of the temple, right? The body is the temple to the soul. And there was a time I treat my body as a temple now, but there was a time when I treated it like an amusement park. And so, it is the importance of, taking care of this thing. It is the mind, body, spirit. It's that trifecta, and you have to take care of all three. And if one starts to wane, it starts to affect the other two. So it is the importance of keeping the body, and it covers everything from kind of nutrition wise and working out wise, sleep, all these kind of new health things that are out there, and it really is just the importance of taking care of yourself.
Well, and it's interesting to note that in many cases, those emotions, those subconscious, those experiences that create such stress start to affect our body. So as we start to notice that we're not feeling good, that can be a good red flag to say, okay, you need to start looking at what's really going on in your life. And obviously, sometimes, health issues are for some other reasons. But I think there's so many times that we can look at something. Stress causes so much stuff happening as far as within the body that it starts to create ill health. And I love the fact that you focus on that, because I think that's so important. Then we get to the fifth rung, emotional alchemy. Talk about that.
Yeah, so that is that's one of the big ones for me. So alchemy, for those that don't know, is the ancient art or process of turning base metals into gold. So brass or metal into gold by kind of an unknown magical process, something sorcerers do. The other kind of sorcerer. I'm a sorcerer with a U. It's a different kind of sorcerer, but real sorcerers apparently can do that. Science may say it's impossible, but science can be kind of boring sometimes. But emotional alchemy is undeniably possible because I do it every day. And that is turning these kind of base emotions that are already there and alchemizing them into higher level emotions, such as joy and love. But there are certain things that you can do that, let's say, like trauma can actually be alchemized into wisdom. Once you disconnect the emotional charge from a traumatic memory, that now you are more wise. Now it is wisdom. It is no longer trauma. It's no longer affecting your life. That's PTSD comes in, and once you take that charge away, now it is now wisdom. So you can work on alchemizing your trauma into wisdom. You can alchemize pain into motivation. Pain can be a great motivating factor. And so you can kind of take that pain and use it. And I certainly was doing that. You want to do more than that, because a lot of people who make it to the top use pain as motivation, and they get to the top and it feels hollow and lonely. So there's more things but that's an example of it, certainly. And another one I love doing is kind of the curiosity of human behavior. Humans can, they can offend us, that, they can scare us. They can disgust us. There's several things that can happen from interaction with other people, and you can be jealous of humans. It's kind of those four kind of main ones. But if you start to study them and get curious, this kind of alchemizes the negative, whatever feeling, jealousy, fear, disgust, whatever one you're already feeling. It turns it into something else, and you start studying them, and you start becoming curious. There's a book out right now that's very buzzy, Mel Robbins, Let Them, and this Let Them theory. It's kind of distancing yourself from them, and that's good in a way, that there is something to that is like, it's much better than kind of being controlling, and I don't want this to happen, and this should be this way, and I don't know why I feel it's kind of disconnecting yourself from them. But that's what's good and bad about it, is you're also disconnecting yourself from them. And I believe we're all one consciousness, and we should all kind of, get along better. So to disconnect completely, I think we should take it a step further than just letting them and study them. So there are, these things you can do to alchemize the kind of negative emotions that are there and turn them into something much more helpful.
It's called reframing. And
Yeah.
I love the word alchemize. So then you get to the sixth one, comfort and discomfort.
Yes. So yeah, that's a pretty self-explanatory one. So it's just, if you're constantly in the comfort zone, it's a beautiful place to be, but a sorcerer understands that nothing really grows there. We all need our comfort, and it's important. But if you're constantly in comfort, I guarantee you're not growing. So it's to purposely put yourself in an uncomfortable situation at least once a week, a really uncomfortable situation. So, it's something that you don't want to do. And it's like, okay, I've told myself I'm going to do something. And especially us here in America, we get so programmed into our, day-to-day life, and it's, oh, I don't want to do that. And oh, that, that's no, do something uncomfortable. It's someone asks you to speak at a wedding. That's uncomfortable. The first reaction for pretty much anyone is no, I don't want to do that. But these things, pushing yourself, you learn more about yourself when you push yourself into some discomfort. And if you're never pushing yourself into discomfort, the universe has a way of shoving you into discomfort. And it's much more uncomfortable. It's like babies out of the nest of the eagle. Like when you get shoved into discomfort, it's a lot more difficult than when you step into it yourself. So that's what that rung is about.
Okay. And then we get into the seventh rung. Attention to intention. I love the wording that you've got there. I think it's great that you talk about attention to intention.
Attention to intention. And, I realized, especially through my 30s, I forget attention deficit disorder. I had intention deficit disorder. I was letting my past create my future. When you're constantly living in past memories and past things, you are going to act as that person and continue to draw in more of what you do not want. Thinking and fearing, and I like to say worrying is praying for what you don't want to happen. So it is about being extremely intentional with things. And the best thing I've with attention is intention is, I found when I go to the gym and, I'll just pop up and do pull-ups, I'll get 12. But if I stand there before I jump up there and say, I'm getting 15, I get 15. So it is extremely important. We are intentional with our energy. And I have found that to just be a life-changing thing. And it's about coming up with a plan, because you can kind of narrate your way through your life. You can kind of Morgan Freeman your way through life if you really do it purposely. So it is about being intentional and tuning into your manifestation. So it's like a radio station, and your intention and what you want. And it's like those old radio stations. We're old enough to remember them, but you have that little wheel on top, and then you have the antenna. So that's mind-heart coherence, which is creating the beacon and creating your manifestation signal. And it's tuning into those two things. You're the mind and heart. All of a sudden now they're in line. You've got a clear intention with an elevated emotion, and that's when miracles happen. So that's what intention is all about.
So true. And then you get into the goats over sheep, eighth rung.
Yeah, goats over sheep. So that's the acronym, greatest of all time. So goats, and it's funny because the animal itself is kind of what represents what I'm talking about here, which is kind of most people were looking at are sheep. They are kind of, everyone just wants to kind of be told what to do, and they're not really questioning anything. It's just they're just intaking information and going, and so the majority of the people around you are sheep. And the first step to being a goat is kind of know that. Not all goats are necessarily sorcerers. Sorcerers are kind of a little bit more humble. Not all goats are super humble, but it is about having that goat mentality. So like greatest of all time, and you have humility about it, but you also believe in your mind that you are that person. And it is, goats are, kind of unhurtable, kind of do their own thing animals, on top of being an acronym, that they're an appropriate animal compared to a sheep, that it's just, they really kind of do their own thing. And so, other people can have great stuff for you, but it's again the world of gray. Other people's opinions can be both helpful and destructive. And a sorcerer goat, is going to work that way through his intuition and come up with the best answer.
Right. And it's really understanding the goodness that lies within you. And you are at that higher level. And then we get into the 9th rung, which is follow your bliss. And we're going to go a little faster here because we're getting close to time.
Yeah, and that's the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, initiation, separation, and in that one I also get into a lot of the simulation theory and how I have a really great argument for this being a simulation, which is essentially a training ground for love is what I consider this to be. A simulation for that. So that kind of gets into that a little bit.
Okay, and then the 10th rung, and I like this one, rose-colored contacts. Talk a little bit about what the people that we surround ourselves with and how that literally affects us.
Yeah, so that's the perspective, as you were talking about, and having a better perspective on things, having better gratitude, and being around others that tend to. It's very good to set. An airplane has lifters and drags. It's very important. Lifters bring it up into the air and the drags will slow it down to land. And we have those in our lives too. And it's very important to identify our lifters and our drags in our life and, be around the lifters more and less around the drags. And it's, we have kind of a name for them now, and they're energy vampires. And these are people that we need to do our best to keep because a lot of them don't even understand what they're doing. They're just stuck in their own perceptive world of negativity and continuing to just, like I said, recycle that old energy. And they're just stuck in a loop and they have no idea. And so these are kind of people that we need to just identify and then do something about.
And sometimes that's tough because sometimes it's quote friends. And yet when you start to realize that energy is negative and affecting you, it's tough to make that separation and that disconnect. But as you say, it is so essential. Now, the 11th one, interesting, instinct versus intuition.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's a lot of people get those. They're confused or they use them interchangeably, instinct and intuition, but they're very different things. And that's why I go over in that rung is that instinct it lives in the gut and intuition lives in the heart. And although we do need instinct at times, I compare it to, like, let's say you're walking down a street on the way home from work and all of a sudden, there's a drive-by and there's a gun hanging out. This is a good time to give into your instinct and react. Instinct is react. But if you don't process the trauma properly from an incident like this, every time you walk home from work, you're going to duck away from every car on the way home, and then you're going to get home and never leave. And that is when instinct has hit overdrive. And many of us are in this instinctual overdrive, and that's the fight or flight, where we're constantly, it was a very adaptive at one time in our lives, and now, running from the tiger, we no longer need to run from tigers. So now, the tiger has now become a coworker, in-law, and now we're in this constant instinctual fight or flight. And so it's getting out of that, and I have intuition training there where I go into how to actually train your intuition and get in touch with you on the player side of the simulation that is the higher self, and how to ask questions and how to build a relationship with your higher self so that you can now use your intuition instead of always instinct, because it can run on overdrive and ruin our lives. It really can.
And that's a great point. So then you get into the 12th rung, that chakra life.
Yeah, that's really about balancing chakras and the importance of recognizing them, where they are. I get into that, and just what they are, where they're located, energy, little vortexes, and how to best balance them and keep and keep them balanced. So yeah, they are real. So that's an important part.
Well, they're real, and what they represent is even more real. And for folks to say, well, chakras, yeah, but really what they're representing is our whole life and how we respond. And I think that's so important. And then you get into the final rung, the 13th rung, which is assist leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't understand that one.
Yeah, that's that. So that's about becoming an assist leader. So I'm a former basketball player. I don't play anymore, but I used to. And some of my favorite basketball players were assist leaders, like Chris Paul and Steve Nash, and these guys were very good at assisting other people. That they were good at scoring, but what they'll remember most as helping their teammates to succeed, and that is what assist leaders do. So it is, it's about kind of finding your own apprentice, like kind of explaining, like kind of going through the rungs and getting yourself better. But the whole point of the book is to try to continue it, because like it's with many things, education can wear off if we don't continue to use it. I got my personal trainer's license over COVID, but I can't currently call myself a personal trainer because you have to take a class every year to keep it going. So like that's the continuing education of it. A lot of the stuff I learned in college, I passed pre-algebra in college, but there's absolutely no way you'd give me a problem with numbers and letters attached to it that I'm going to be able to solve it. I have no idea, not a clue. So assist leader, it's about keeping this information going and helping other people, finding your own apprentice, and teaching. Because once you start teaching, then it really gets into your psyche and your soul, and you start becoming and staying that person. So that's what that's about.
And in your book, as I was looking at it, it's like, all right, there's a 13th, but oh, whoops, there's an encore.
Yeah, yeah. That's just kind of the summation of everything. I kind of go over just with what to do, and how important it is to kind of keep things going. And if you picture your journey like the stock market, the stock market is something that it's had its huge downfalls and crashes over time, but if you look at the grand scope of things, it's gone from very minimal to it's a 40,000 or whatever now, and it's now thousands of times what it was worth. So over time it continues to go, but you're going to have these times of uncertainty and crashes, but over time it's going to continue to go up. So if you look at your life like the stock market, it's going to continue to go up, but you have to get through those dips.
Well, and as we talk about encore, then what would be a message that you'd like to share with the audience, kind of as a final message and thought?
I've kind of thought, and the main message I'd like to share with people, and something that I wish someone had told me, is the world may be against you, but the universe is for you, and really that's all that matters. That's all that matters.
Yeah. Okay. A good message. So how do people find your book?
Yeah. So it's on Amazon. Search by my name, Justin L. Shaw. I don't know if you have links or whatever I could send you to, but if you just search for my name, Justin L. Shaw, it's kind of hard with the sorcery misspelled. It wants to autocorrect it and stuff. So the best way is Amazon and my name. I just recently, I've been off social media for 4 years now, and I just got back on Instagram like last week. So if you follow me, I'll follow you back, because it's all good people. I haven't even told my friends and family I'm on it, because I kind of want it to just be like, I want to see like all these people from these fun podcasts, and these are kind of my people. So it's Sorcerer with a U _13 on Instagram, and that's all I've got going right now. I'm just at the very beginnings of this. Book just came out 6 weeks ago or whatever, so things are still happening, and I'm still building stuff. I'm working on a website, but it's not up yet, so it's all coming together, but that's what I got right now.
So, and are you ultimately wanting to become that assist leader and actually start to work with people and become a coach of some sort?
Yes, yeah, I would love to be able to do that. Kind of on maybe on the macro level, I'd love to, get together some webinars or even go on kind of tours. And I call myself a mystical comedian, because you've got your comedians, kind of spiritual teachers, leaders, and I'm kind of a mix of the two. So I would love to be able to get together and, like have a thing where I like to write meditations, and I do that. And so to be able to bring in and get people to have this really powerful meditation to get going, and then make people laugh and think and feel all at the same time, and kind of do like a stand up, that would be amazing. So there's stuff happening. I was just told, get the book out, write the book, you need a place to start, here it is, now let's see where this is going to go.
Great, great. Hey, well, and good luck with that. I know that you're going to have some effect on some other people, and I appreciate the fact this book, I think, is so effective as we went through each of the rungs of how someone literally, if they'll read it, can start to experience a complete change in their life and develop a new sense of reality for themselves. So appreciate very much what you've done. And folks, appreciate the fact that you're listening today and hope you enjoyed it. Look forward to having you join us again soon. So this is Dr. Doug saying namaste.